So around a week ago, I did my first NFL mock draft. It was one round, didn't do 2 rounds. This time it's a 2-round mock draft. And some of the comments in last video, you guys opened my eyes, changed my opinion on some stuff. So I made some changes in the first round, actually a lot of changes in the first round. There's probably like 5 or 6 picks that stayed the same, but a lot of changes in here. And we'll do the first 64 picks this time as compared to the first 32. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It might take a while, so sit back and enjoy, and let's get into it. So number 1 overall, I have Joe Burrow still going to the Cincinnati Bengals. I think it makes the most sense. As I said before, I do think a team might try to trade up here, but they might take 4 or 5 first-round picks or something crazy to do so. So I don't see it actually happening. Maybe the Dolphins can swing something here, but I just don't see it. Joe Burrow, as I said before, a close to flawless quarterback prospect. You should not pass up on that. It looks like Andy Dalton's time is over in Cincinnati. Zach Taylor entering his second year as a head coach, an offensive guy, a former quarterback, I believe, in college. So I'm sure when he watches a guy like Joe Burrow play, his eyes light up, and I just do not see the Bengals passing on Joe Burrow. Number 2 is Chase Young to the Redskins, the edge defender from Ohio State. So I had this in the last video as well. This is another scenario where I think teams might try to trade up because this is a non-quarterback pick. But I think Chase Young, even though he's not a quarterback, is too good of a player to trade out of that pick for. So as I said, it might take a tremendous amount of picks to do so. But if you're the Redskins, you have Ryan Kerrigan, who's 32 years old, a new defensive-minded head coach. I have no idea why you would pass on Chase Young, who's a guy who definitely could have double-digit sacks for the next 10 years, and it would not surprise me. So he's a tremendous pass rusher. I think he's a good all-around player, a great all-around player. It's very hard to find flaws in his game, and that's just an easy pick for Washington in my mind. For number 3, we have the Lions staying at number 3. So last video I had the Dolphins trading up for Tua, but I don't think the Dolphins are too into Tua. It's hard to say, but I don't think they're too into him right now. So it's kind of hard to predict who's going to go here. I don't know if they're going to trade the pick or not, but if they stay here, I think we all know it's probably Jeffrey Okudah, the cornerback from Ohio State. So as I said, there's Darius Slay left for Philadelphia, got traded, so there's a void there for cornerback 1, and Jeffrey Okudah is probably the best cornerback prospect in this draft. Some people want to say C.J. Henderson might be better. I would argue that, but definitely he has the most upside, so I would go with Jeffrey Okudah here for the Lions at number 3. For my favorite team, the Giants, I have them going Jedrick Wills Jr. this time. So last time I had it as Tristan Wirfs, but a lot of rumblings on Twitter and whatnot have been Jedrick Wills going to the Giants, which I would love because Jedrick Wills is probably my number 1 offensive tackle in this class. He's up there with Andrew Thomas. I think I think Tristan Wirfs is probably number 3 in my mind, so I'd be very thrilled with Jedrick Wills here. So the latest rumors have him going to the Giants. They have Nate Solder and Cam Fleming under 1-year deals, basically. Nate Solder does have 2 years left, I believe it is, but he'll probably be cut after this year. There's no reason to keep him for $19 million or whatever it is next season, so they'll probably get out of that contract as soon as possible. And the Giants, they need protection for Daniel Jones, who definitely had a fumbling issue last year, and they need to open up holes for their second overall running back, Saquon Barkley, so this pick makes a lot of sense in my mind. Number 5, we have the Dolphins, and this is a different pick from last time. I have Justin Herbert this time. So if you look at the betting odds, right now it's Justin Herbert more likely to go over Tua, and I think Vegas knows more than I do, so I want to go with that as my prediction. So I think the Dolphins, they could wait until next year for a quarterback, but I say why not? They've apparently done all their homework on Justin Herbert. They've done the most work on him in the draft I saw, so it wouldn't shock me if this was the pick. You do have Ryan Fitzpatrick, Josh Rosen there, who I guess could hold down the fort for 1 more year, but if you think Justin Herbert's a franchise quarterback, there's no reason not to pass on that. They could pass on Tua Tagovailoa because of the injury concerns and stuff, so that would make sense to me. I do think Tua is the better player, but I just don't know if he'll stay healthy. But if it was me as a GM, I would take Tua before Herbert, but it looks like Miami right now is in love with Justin Herbert, so it would not surprise me if he went number 5 overall here. So number 6, we have the Chargers, and this time it is Tua Tagovailoa. So I did not think this was going to happen a week ago, but as I said, things changed. So now I have the quarterback from Alabama going to the Chargers at 6, and right now they have Tyrod Taylor. He's definitely not a future answer at quarterback for this team. Maybe he could be a stopgap player for 1 year, but really, if you have a player like Tua with that much upside sitting at number 6, I don't see why you don't take that, and I do feel bad for Tyrod Taylor because this would probably be a similar situation to Baker Mayfield in 2018 when basically Tyrod Taylor played a couple games, made a couple starts, and then got benched for Baker, and this might happen with Tua, so we'll see. And the Chargers definitely still have a left tackle issue, but Tua is a lefty, so if you have Brian Bulaga covering your blind line side, it makes it a lot better. Not saying the Chargers don't need offensive line help, because they do, especially at that left tackle spot. But taking Tua here, I think, makes a lot of sense. I know the Chargers don't have good history with injury luck and stuff like that, but everyone's different, so I think Tua going here at number 6 would be really good value for the Chargers, and hopefully for their sake he can have a healthy career. Number 7, we have the Carolina Panthers once again taking Isaiah Simmons. So this was in the last video. I think it just makes too much sense for them. Luke Kuechly retires, and this guy I think might play inside linebacker in the NFL. He could play anywhere, as we know, but Isaiah Simmons I think would be a great start to a defense that definitely needs to be revamped. You lose Luke Kuechly, you lose James Bradbury, some of your best defensive players, and Gerald McCoy as well if you want to include him. So yeah, they definitely need some help on their defensive side of the ball, and I think Isaiah Simmons, a guy that can play anywhere and play at a high level, would be a very good start for Carolina. At number 8, we have the Arizona Cardinals taking Tristan Wirfs from Iowa. So he played a lot of right tackle in Iowa, mostly right tackle. He had a couple of starts at left tackle. They have DJ Humphries right now, who they signed to an extension, who plays left tackle. They do have Marcus Gilbert at right tackle, but he gets injured too much. I don't really trust him to stay healthy. I'm sure the Cardinals don't either. So Tristan Wirfs is probably going to be their week 1 right tackle, assuming he goes here. I think this would be a good scheme fit as well because, in the spread offense, if you have a fast offensive lineman and a guy that's just a freak athlete, I feel that'd be a good fit. A natural right tackle. You already have your left tackle in Humphries, so I think this pick would make a lot of sense for Arizona. So pick number 9 gives us our first trade of the mock draft. So I have the Niners trading out to take Jerry Jeudy, the wide receiver for Alabama. The Jaguars, who originally owned this pick, will get pick number 13 and a second rounder for 2021, which is next draft. It makes sense because the Jaguars trading down, they still get the guy they want, so I think it makes sense. And the 49ers, you get to jump 2 teams that are pretty wide receiver needy in the Raiders and the Jets, so I do think that would make a lot of sense there. So Jerry Jeudy, very talented receiver, we all know that. It's him or CeeDee Lamb probably as the wide receiver 1 in this class. I definitely have heard the Niners more linked to Judy's name, so I think that would be the pick for them. And, if you're the Niners, you're so close to winning a Super Bowl last year, you might as well get a guy that you think can put you over the top. And if you have to trade a second-round pick for next year to do so, I feel it's worth it. So this is a trade I think that could happen. I think Jerry Jeudy would be a nice fit for the 49ers. Pick number 10 gives us another trade. So we've heard rumors about the Browns wanting to trade down and the Falcons wanting to trade up, and I think they'd be good trade partners here. So I have the Falcons giving the Browns pick number 16, 2 fourth-round picks in this year's draft, and the Falcons receive pick number 10, obviously. So the Falcons would trade up. They need a cornerback. They had Desmond Trufant, of course. They released him. He went to the Lions, and now they would take C.J. Henderson, probably the second-best cornerback. I think him and Christian Fulton are pretty close, but probably the second-best cornerback in this class, C.J. Henderson. Very good in man coverage. I think he could be a lockdown number 1 corner in the NFL potentially. There's some concerns about his tackling ability, but if they can overlook that, this guy can have a very good NFL career. So I think this would make sense for both teams. Cleveland doesn't want to stay in the 10th spot apparently, and the Falcons want to trade up for somebody they really want. There's been a lot of buzz about C.J. Henderson being a top 10 pick in this draft, so I think this is a trade that once again could happen. For pick number 11, we have the Jets taking Andrew Thomas. So this would be a dream scenario for the Jets and their fans. So they did sign George Fant to play tackle, and they have Chuma Edoga to play right tackle, who's unproven right now. But I think Thomas is the second best prospect at tackle in this draft. This would be a home run pick for the Jets based on value. So I'm sure Jets fans would love to see this happen. I'm not sold on him falling all the way to 11 in the real draft, but in this scenario, that's how it worked out. So luckily for the Jets, they get Andrew Thomas at number 11. For number 12, we have the Las Vegas Raiders taking CeeDee Lamb, the wide receiver from Oklahoma. So I'm not the only one to mock CeeDee Lamb to the Raiders, that's for sure. That's happened a lot in this offseason. So it makes a lot of sense because they need a wide receiver. I know they have Tyrell Williams, Hunter Renfrow, some other guys. I think they signed Nelson Aguilar too. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I heard that at some point. So with Jerry Jeudy off the board already taken, this is the next best option at receiver in my mind. They could have taken a cornerback here, but I have that happening later, I believe. So that'll be the pick for me right now. CeeDee Lamb going to the Raiders at number 12. Now at number 13, we have the Jaguars via the trade back with the 49ers. So I had the Jaguars once again taking Javon Kinlaw, the defensive tackle from South Carolina, a guy with a ton of upside. And yes, I do think he goes over Derek Brown in the draft. I could be wrong about that, but I could see it happening for sure. So We know the Jaguars love taking these defensive linemen with a ton of upside, and I think that's exactly what Javon Kinlaw is. He's a bit raw, which is scary because he still produced very highly at South Carolina, so if he learns even more, he can be an even better player. At number 14, we have the Buccaneers taking Mekhi Becton, the humongous offensive tackle from Louisville. So the Bucs offensive line isn't like quote-unquote terrible, but it could be a little better, and I say why not take a shot on a guy like Becton? You have Tom Brady. You're probably going all in this year, I meant to say. So if you take a tackle with a ton of upside and it works out, that could be a great pick, and Tom Brady is probably a 2 or 3 year investment there. So I feel like that's not the worst pick in the world. I mean, the Buccaneers, as I said, their defense before, I did say it's not too bad. I like their defense on paper, so I mean, they could have taken like a safety here, but I think Mekhi Becton still being on the board with that much upside, I feel like that's a pick you should not pass up on. As I said, I'm not the biggest Becton fan, but I do think with the amount of upside he has, it's probably worth taking it at number 14. At number 15, we have the Denver Broncos taking Henry Ruggs III, the wide receiver from Alabama. I think this is a perfect fit because the Broncos definitely need speed. I mean, they have guys like Cortland Sutton, they have Deshaun Hamilton, even Noah Fant at tight end, and you want to throw in the running backs, they now have Melvin Gordon. Of course, they have Phillip Lindsay. A lot of good skill pieces here, but if you add a guy like Henry Ruggs to take the top off of defense, that can be a complete game changer for the Broncos offense. Their offensive line needs to be a little better. Drew Lock played pretty well last year, so if he can progress even more, the Broncos can be that scary team next year that takes a big jump. So I would love this pick, Henry Ruggs, going to the Broncos at 15. At number 16, we have the Cleveland Browns taking Ezra Cleveland, the offensive tackle from Boise State. This is probably the surprising pick of this mock draft so far, but apparently the Browns are in love with Ezra Cleveland based off reports, and I don't know if it's the last name. I hope it's not. I hope it's more of the player than the actual last name here, but the Browns definitely need a left tackle, so based on their positional needs, they definitely need a left tackle. I don't know if Ezra Cleveland taking 16 is a good value. It's probably not, but if they love the guy and think he's worth that pick, then you go ahead and do it. I mean, they already traded back with the Falcons. They accumulated a couple of 4th-round picks in the process, so they did it the right way. There are a lot of things I like about Cleveland. The concern is, he's not that strong apparently. I mean, people think he could get stronger. His competition level in college was a concern for some people, but honestly, I watched him on tape a couple of games. He's not that bad. He has good feet. I think he has pretty good hands as well, just has really good technique. So if the Browns think they can make this work, I think it could be a very solid pick here, even at 16. At number 17, we have the Dallas Cowboys taking K'Lavon Chaisson, the outside linebacker. In this case, it would be defensive end probably for LSU. So I'd rather see him in a 3-4, but it is what it is. I do think he has the talent and skill set to play defensive end in a 4-3. DeMarcus Lawrence had a down year last year. Tyrone Crawford is decent, but I think he got hurt last year anyway. So, why not take a defensive end who has a crazy amount of upside, and you win in the NFL by getting to the passer? I know there's more than just that, but, getting to the passer is definitely a big key to winning in the NFL. And if they think they can make Chaisson into a great pass rusher, I feel it's a good value at 17. I mean, some people have different opinions about Chaisson. They think he'll be a star. Some people think he's a bust, but if Dallas sees enough potential here, this could be the pick here at 17. At number 18, I have the Dolphins taking Derek Brown, the defensive tackle from Auburn. So some people probably think I'm crazy for having Derek Brown fall this far, but I do think it's a possibility. I do think he falls outside the top 10 in the actual draft. For this mock draft, I have him going 18th. The Dolphins right now have one good player on their defensive line. It's Christian Wilkins, who was a first-rounder last year. They do currently have Avery Moss as a starter, and I do remember him as a Giants fan being a rotational player on a bad Giants defense. So that cannot be a good starting option for them right now, so they could use some help on that defensive line. I think Derek Brown falling this far is probably not a need for the Dolphins, but it's just too good of a player to pass on at this point. He'll be very good in the run game. Not sure about his upside as a pass rusher, but I guess we'll see. But at this value, I feel like you cannot pass on that if you're the Dolphins. At number 19, I have the Las Vegas Raiders taking Christian Fulton, the cornerback from LSU. So I do like Fulton a lot. I do think he's probably number 2, number 3 as in cornerbacks in this draft. And I did have Fulton going number 12, I believe, to the Raiders last draft. But this time I have him going 19 because C.J. Henderson went all the way at 10. So not a corner taken in the past 8 picks. But I do think Christian Fulton's going to be really good in the NFL. He played injured last year, had a good year. Right now, the Raiders could use a cornerback too next to Trayvon Mullen, who had a good year last year as a rookie. So they could have 2 really good young corners right there. I do think it's a good scheme fit as well, so I definitely would love to see this pick for the Raiders, Christian Fulton going number 19. At number 20, I have the Jacksonville Jaguars taking Patrick Queen, the linebacker from LSU. So before we had them taking Javon Kinlaw, so I guess Telvin Smith is retired or just not coming back, so I guess we'll have a guy replace him that's kind of like Telvin Smith in a way, but much younger. So Patrick Queen can do a lot of similar things he was doing. I think Queen has a lot of upside in pass coverage, and he's just a very raw raw athlete. I think he ended up being an inside linebacker starter like in week 4 or something this year. He wasn't even a starter to start the season, so he's still very young, very raw, has a lot of upside, so I would love this pick for the Jaguars, who probably aren't going to be good for the next couple of years, unfortunately. But, by the time the Jaguars get really good again, this guy might be a star by then, so Patrick Queen, I think, would be worth taking here, number 20 overall. At number 21, I have the Eagles taking Justin Jefferson, the wide receiver from LSU, and I had this in my first mock, and I still love the fit. So Jefferson is probably going to be a slot receiver in the NFL, just like college, and I do think the Eagles need a slot receiver with Alshon Jeffrey on the outside, and hopefully a healthy Deshaun Jackson as well. So if you're going to add Jefferson in the slot, a guy that can get open and has reliable hands, it could be a very good option for Carson Wentz. Of course, they have the good pass-catching tight ends as well, and Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz, but why not add a wide receiver in the slot that can get open, hopefully stay healthy. I don't think he had any injuries in college that's noteworthy. So you cannot trust the health of Alshon Jeffrey and Deshaun Jackson, unfortunately. So I think taking a wide receiver here is pretty vital for the Eagles, but they could trade back as well. If they don't like who's on the board right now, I could definitely see the Eagles trading back, but I do think Justin Jefferson will be a good fit here for Philadelphia. At number 22, I have the Vikings going Jaylen Johnson, the cornerback from Utah. I did have this in my last mock as well. I do think Johnson has the tools to be a cornerback 1 based on his football IQ and his athleticism. So Xavier Rhodes is now gone off the Vikings, and I think he went to the Colts actually. So they'll be looking for a top corner. I could definitely see it at pick number 22 or 25 based on who's on the board. And Jaylen Johnson here might be a reach in some people's minds, but I do think he has that body type and has the skill set, and I love the football IQ on him to be a cornerback 1 in the NFL. It might be a bit of a transition. It might take a year, but I think eventually he'll be a pretty good NFL player. At number 23, I have the Patriots taking A.J. Epinesa, the defensive end from Iowa, or edge defender if you want to call him that. So he did play in a 4-3 at Iowa, so now he might go to a 3-4 defense, obviously, in New England. So the Patriots, they do like to trade down, but why not take Epinesa here? I do think he has a pro-ready style of play. I mean, he's not like a Chase-on type guy where you're relying on a bunch of upside. I think A.J. Epinesa is, what you see is what you get. I do think of a pretty nice NFL career. He might be like an 8-9 sack guy per year eventually, and I do think he's pretty good against the run. Did not have a good combine, obviously, but if there's any defense that he could thrive in, it could be New England because they do have that great secondary still. This guy can get a lot of cleanup sacks and I think have a pretty smooth transition to the NFL, and this seems like the type of prospect that the Patriots would like, so I could see this pick happening. At number 24, I have the New Orleans Saints going with Kenneth Murray, the linebacker from Oklahoma. So the Saints, they're probably going to be up there as Super Bowl favorites for 2020. They definitely need some help at linebacker. This might be their last time to go all in with Drew Brees, who was pretty close to retirement last year apparently, or this offseason I should say. So New Orleans, if they can get a good linebacker outside of Demario Davis, who still is playing at a high level, but outside of Demario Davis, there's really no good linebackers on the Saints right now. So if Murray can come in here and be that man in the middle and make a bunch of tackles sideline to sideline and just be a good player against the run and show some upside in the pass coverage game as well, that can be a very solid pick and a good value for the Saints. I mean, some people think Murray should be a early second round pick. I don't view him as that. I think he's a late first round pick. I know it's a pretty weak linebacker class, but this would be a nice fit for the Saints if they can land Murray at 24. So just a few picks later, and the Vikings are up once again, this time at 25. I have Yetur Gross-Matos going to the Vikings from Penn State, the edge rusher. He would now be a defensive end if he were to go to the Vikings. So they do have Everson Griffin, but it looks like he's going to walk this offseason. I don't think they're going to re-sign him, it looks like. So they probably have a hole at defensive end next to Danielle Hunter. So I think Yetur Gross-Matos is a guy, he's 6'5", 265, has really good athleticism for his size, good strength, good length, and just has all those measurables that teams would fall in love with. He did not produce too highly in college. His numbers were not crazy, but pretty good. So I do think the end of the first round is a pretty reasonable spot to have him. Some people, just like Kenneth Murray, might have him in the early second round, but I do think late first is a pretty good value here, and it's a need for the Vikings. I know Vikings fans probably want a wide receiver here, but I think they can wait till the second round or even third round to make that pick. At 26, we have the Dolphins once again. This time I have Josh Jones going. I had this in my last mock as well. So the Dolphins earlier already picked Justin Herbert. They already picked Derek Brown, so now they're gonna help the offensive line, obviously, taking Josh Jones, who I do think is one of the better pass protectors in this class. He does not have some of the physical gifts that the Bectons and the Tristan Wirfs type have, but look at his technique, look at his pass blocking, very good at it. I do think he could be a week one starter in the NFL. I think he's one of the more underrated players in this class, as I said last video, and I know he's going in the first round still, but he's not talked in like that top 4 category of top offensive tackles. It's always Wills, it's always Thomas, it's always Wirfs, it's always Becton. You never hear Josh Jones' name in that conversation, and I do think he deserves deserves it. So I do think he would start on this Miami offensive line, which obviously needs some help. So I do think Josh Jones would be a terrific pick here if the Dolphins were able to land him at 26. At number 27, we have the Giants trading up to this pick, taking Cesar Ruiz, the center from Michigan. The Seahawks will receive pick number 36 in round 2 and pick number 110 in round 4. So the Seahawks and Giants traded last year in a very similar scenario. So the Giants traded out to take DeAndre Baker last year, the cornerback, and I could see it happening once again. The Giants don't really have any options at center right now. Their regular starting center, John Jalapeno, who has underperformed the last couple of years, tore his Achilles late in the season, so he might not be ready for the start of next year. And Cesar Ruiz is one of the biggest risers in this class, and for a good reason. He's a very solid player, finally got his recognition. I could see him being a late first-round pick, and if you're the Giants making this trade, you jump over a team like the 49ers that definitely needs a center, so I think this trade would make a lot of sense for both team standpoints. The Seahawks don't really have a clear pick on the board right now. I had them going Ezra Cleveland in the last video, but now that he's gone, I just don't see them having a clear pick, so I do think the Seahawks might be a team that always tries to trade back. I think they can do it once again in this year's draft. At number 28, I have the Ravens going Zach Baun, the linebacker from Wisconsin. So apparently Zach Baun had some type of diluted sample from his urine, so that could be an issue coming up in the draft, but hopefully it's nothing too big. I hope he's not trying to hide anything. The rumor was that he was trying to drink too much water to put on weight because, I think teams would like to see a player like Baun weigh a bit more, so I guess it's a valid reason, but I guess we'll see. But the Ravens can definitely use some help at off-ball linebacker, or even outside linebacker if Matthew Judon leaves next year because he was franchise tagged, so this might be a move for the future, but they definitely could use some off-ball linebackers. People have talked about moving Zach Baun to that position, so we'll see what happens, but this would be a good pick. He's a versatile player. I think an NFL pro-ready type guy, and he would help the Ravens compete for a Super Bowl next year. At number 29, we have the Tennessee Titans taking Ross Blacklock, the defensive tackle from TCU. So the Titans traded Jarrell Casey, but didn't really fill that hole after he was traded, so I do think they could address that in the draft, and he's definitely good at stopping the run, and that can definitely help for a playoff team, or what should be a playoff team in the Tennessee Titans. Stopping the run would definitely be huge for them, and Blacklock's explosiveness for his size is definitely something that stood out when I watched him, so I do think he could develop into a good pass rusher at some point. We haven't seen it yet, but at least he has that potential if the Titans were to take him. At number 30, we have the Packers taking Denzel Mims. I had this in my last video as well, and I talked about Cesar Ruiz being a big riser, but this man is the ultimate riser in this draft process, Denzel Mims. So Mims showed at the Senior Bowl and even combine workouts that he can do everything, and just really blew away people's expectations in this whole draft process. And there's always concerns about route running for Baylor receivers, but it shouldn't be that big of a concern for a guy like Mims and his talent level. So I do think for the Packers it would be a good fit. You did have guys like Geronimo Allison and Alan Lazard and those type of guys, and Equanimous St. Brown trying to catch passes for the Packers. It was not working out. They could use a good wide receiver too, and this guy could be the answer. At number 31, we have a trade. So the Texans would take A.J. Terrell, the cornerback from Clemson. The 49ers are trading out of this pick and receiving pick number 40 in round 2 and pick number 111 in round 4. So the Texans receive this pick, and honestly, who knows what Bill O'Brien is up to nowadays. He's made so many questionable moves in the past month, but this doesn't seem too bad to trade up in the first round and take a first-round talent cornerback, so it doesn't seem like the worst trade in the world for them. People like him based off his 6'1 frame. He ran a 4.42 40, has all the athleticism you'd want, so I think, he played as a true freshman at Clemson, so a lot of experience there. He's always been a very solid player. I do think he would be a nice fit, and Jonathan Joseph is finally off the Texans for the first time since 2011, so this would be a good fit and a guy that could replace Joseph and be a cornerback 1 or a cornerback 2 to start off for the Texans defense. At number 32, we have the Super Bowl champion Chiefs taking Noah Igbenogany, the cornerback from Auburn. That's one of the toughest names in this draft. The Chiefs recently re-signed Brashad Breeland to a 1-year deal, but their secondary still could use some help, and Igbenogany is an interesting guy with the track background. He's definitely new to the position and playing football in general, so he can use that track star ability to play a very good cornerback in the NFL. He needs to improve on his technique and anticipation skills, but honestly, when I watched him on tape, I'll admit, I don't watch hours and hours of these guys on tape. When I watched a few games of Noah Igbenogany play, I was very impressed. He looked like a guy that was playing football his whole life, so I think there's a lot of upside with this pick, and playing for a team like the Chiefs and under Steve Spagnuolo can be a very, easy transition as compared to most cornerbacks in other places. So I do like this pick a lot. If the Chiefs were to make it, they need that secondary help, and this could be a guy that can help them out for sure. We now enter round 2. We start with the Bengals once again. Willie Gay Jr., the linebacker from Mississippi State, and sometimes these fits just make too much sense, and you know the Bengals have no issues taking players with off-the-field issues. They took Joe Mixon in the second round after a video surfaced of him punching a girl in the jaw, so they can take anybody. So Willie Gay is a guy who probably has first-round talent, but apparently he punched his quarterback in the face and had some kind of academic suspension for cheating on a test, so not the best off the field guy, but when you look at him as a player, very talented player, and I do think the Bengals would take this chance. I think the fit makes a lot of sense because the Bengals absolutely need some linebackers, specifically inside linebacker help, and I do think Willie Gay Jr. could be that guy. At number 34, we have the Colts taking T. Higgins, the wide receiver from Clemson, who did fall a bit in this draft, but there hasn't been much hype around him, so I could see him being an early second-round pick. So I admitted last video I wasn't the biggest T. Higgins fan out there, but I think he could succeed in the right system just like most players. I think playing with guys like T.Y. Hilton, Paris Campbell in the slot, if he's healthy, hopefully, would be a nice fit. And they definitely need some jump ball players in the red zone because now Eric Ebron's with Pittsburgh. They do have Mo Alley Cox, of course, but that's not really a primary red zone receiver. So T. Higgins could be a really good red zone receiver. He proved it in college. He would be a very good outside receiver for this Colts team. I think it would be a good fit. They now have Phillip Rivers, and it's kind of like, Phillip Rivers played with Mike Williams last year. The last couple of years, I should say, or the last few years maybe. I think Mike Williams has been around for a while, so we're just getting old over here. But yeah, this would be a good fit. I do think Mike Williams had a 10 touchdown season a couple years ago, so I could see the same thing happening with T. Higgins here. They have similar body types. I think Mike Williams is probably a little bit heavier, but around the same height, so I do think this fit would make a lot of sense for the Colts. At number 35, we have the Lions once again. They picked Jeffrey Okudah in the first round. Now I have them taking Neville Gallimore, the defensive lineman from Oklahoma. So it seems like Damon Snacks Harrison is definitely done in Detroit. He was contemplating retirement, but definitely had enough for Detroit, honestly. That's what it seemed like based off what I saw on Twitter the other day. So Gallimore gets credit for being a freak athlete, and I had that in my notes when I was watching him. I was very impressed with how fast he was for his size and definitely has some good upside in my opinion. So of course there could be some technique issues to work on, but I think he has all the tools to be a really good defensive tackle, and the Lions definitely need somebody to help be a run stuffer, and I do think that Neville Gallimore could be that guy. At number 36, we have the Seahawks making their first pick via the trade back, so I have them taking Austin Jackson, the offensive tackle from USC. I've admitted before on my other channel I'm not the biggest Austin Jackson believer, but I still think he has a lot of upside to prove me and anybody else wrong. So with George Fant now departed for the Jets, the Seahawks are always needing offensive line help, and I could see them picking someone with their first pick. I do think Jackson has good feet for an offensive tackle, but has many technique issues. I saw him getting beat too many times. I only watched a few games of him, but when I watched him, I wasn't too impressed, to be honest. So maybe I watched his 3 worst games, but wasn't a big Austin Jackson fan. But, in the Seahawks system, there's a lot of play action. It doesn't really rely on your tackles too much. It's not like you're playing in a Patriots-type offense or maybe the Chiefs or something like that. It's much easier in a play-action-heavy offense for a tackle to not get exposed. So I do think Austin Jackson might have an easier transition there. The Seahawks definitely need offensive line help, so I do think it'd be a pretty good fit as long as Austin Jackson fulfills that upside. At number 37, we have the Chargers taking Lloyd Cushenberry, the center. Well, now I'd have him a guard from LSU. So the Chargers right now have Mike Pouncey at center for now. He is getting up there in age, but for right now, he is the starting center. I think Cushenberry can slide in and play left guard, which is a need for the Chargers right now. He's a very smart player, made a bunch of call-outs at the line for LSU, and can definitely help a young quarterback if it's in fact Tua Tagovailoa or if it's Justin Herbert or any young quarterback that goes there. So he does very well at anchoring himself in pass rushing reps. He does have some lateral movement skills that are a bit rough sometimes, but for the most part he's a very solid player. He gets a lot of praise for what he did at LSU, so I do think he'd be a pretty good interior offensive lineman in the NFL. I would never put him at tackle, but I do think on the inside he have a pretty solid career. Hopefully one day he'll be a center, and I do think it'd be a nice fit if he went to the Chargers. At number 38, I have the Panthers taking Grant Delpit, the safety from LSU, and I cannot tell if I like Delpit or not. You see some plays where he just has great anticipation and makes a great play on the ball, and you fall in love with those plays, but then you see a bunch of plays where he misses the easiest tackles in the world, and it makes you want to pull your hair out. So I really have no idea where I stand on him. I do think the Panthers have a need at strong safety right now, so I do think you can plug Delpit in there, be a week 1 starter. Now they would have Delpit and Isaiah Simmons, some very freakishly athletic players with similar body types. Be a very nice start for this revamped Panther defense, and if it, I don't know if he's going to fall to 38, but if he does, I do feel the Panthers would be a nice fit for Delpit. At 39, I have the first running back going off the board, DeAndre Swift from Georgia. So the Dolphins running backs last year were atrocious. atrocious, especially after Kenyon Drake got traded. But to be fair to them, there was nobody blocking for them. I don't think any running back could have done well in that system, so it is what it is. And honestly, when I watch Swift play, he reminds me a lot of LaShawn McCoy 2.0. I mean, he has a bunch of crazy jukes and breakaway speed. I mean, that's how the old Shady McCoy was. Not really breakaway speed anymore, but he used to for sure. So he's shown that he can be a very good receiver as well. I do think he's probably one of the better running backs in this class. I like somebody else a bit more who's going later. We'll get into that when it happens, but I think for DeAndre Swift, he would be a good fit here. He can catch some swing passes, make guys miss in the open field, and if they can have some type of run blocking for the Dolphins, he could have a solid career. But if I was a running back, I'd have concerns about going to this team given their offensive line issues. At number 40, we have the 49ers. This was originally the Texans' pick, but after the trade back, we have the 49ers taking Jeff Gladney, the cornerback from TCU. So after the 2020 season, the Niners don't really have many secondary members that are under contract. I think Richard Sherman's contract's up. I think both safeties might be up as well. So they do have some needs right now. I mean, this is definitely for the future, but they have a need at center currently. I had Cesar Ruiz going to the Giants, and in that case, I'd have the Niners trading back. I think it makes the most sense. I wouldn't really take another center here. I know I had Cushenberry going to the Chargers, but that was to play guard right now. So they do have K'Wan Williams, who has been really great as a slot corner. So I know Gladney is probably more of a slot corner. That's based off his size, but he could play outside. He's very physical. I mean, I know he might not get away with some of that in the NFL, but I'm not sure how much he'd play with a healthy Niner secondary. But if someone were to go down, he'd be a great guy to fill, and I do think he'd be a good future option as well if guys like Richard Sherman eventually walk, or maybe there's a need at free safety in the future and you could put Gladney there. So he's a very talented player, and I do think a team like the Niners with Robert Saleh can definitely make it work if they obtain a talent like Jeff Gladney. So I wanted to correct myself real quick. So Jimmy Ward's under contract for a few more years of free safety, but Jaquiski Tartt, Richard Sherman, Emmanuel Mosley, those guys all have 1 year left under contract, so that's kind of why I wanted to put Jeff Gladney there for the 49ers. Now on to the Browns at 41. So I'm going to have them taking Xavier McKinney, which is tremendous value in my mind. I think I had McKinney going to the Buccaneers in the first round last time, but I've seen other mock drafts and people talking about McKinney, and it seems like the NFL is not too high on him, I guess, based off the size concerns and stuff like that. And I guess he has some other flaws to his game. But the Browns, they do have a need at free safety. They did sign Carl Joseph to play strong safety. Demarius Randall went to the Raiders, I believe, so now they have a hole there. So he's a solid tackler, good versatility, but not freakishly athletic, which might hold him back and might hold him to the second round. I think overall he'll be pretty good in the NFL, and he might switch to strong safety one day, but if his coverage skills aren't there, that might be the case. But if his coverage skills are there, I think he'll be a pretty damn good free safety, and the Browns will get a pretty good value here for a good player. At number 42, I have the Jaguars going Trayvon Diggs, the cornerback from Alabama. So the first two picks, I had them going in the first round, Patrick Queen and Javon Kinlaw. But now we got to address cornerback because Jalen Ramsey's gone. AJ Bouye was traded in the offseason as well. So the Jaguars obviously have some needs at cornerback. So Diggs has a perfect body type and really good speed, a tremendous against deep balls. He's a former wide receiver. His brother, of course, is Stephon Diggs, the now Bills wide receiver. So he's relatively new to position. I think he changed to cornerback fully in 2017, I think it was. So the one downside is he's a bit over-aggressive, and he could have, grab too much, which definitely could cause some penalties in the NFL. But for the most part, he has all the physical tools. He's relatively new to the position, so I think he'll continue to get better. As I said for Patrick Queen before, I mean, Patrick Queen's very young. He's still learning the position, basically, and Trayvon Diggs is kind of similar. He's still very young, and he might not come around for a couple years, but when Trayvon Diggs reaches that full potential, he can be a very good NFL corner. At number 43, I have the Bears going Jeremy Chin, the safety from Southern Illinois. So the Bears could use a strong safety after Clinton Dix went to Dallas on a very cheap contract, which is still puzzling because he had a pretty good year last year. I mean, Chicago fans can correct me if I'm wrong, but seemed to have a good year. And Chin could be one of those guys who might have some transition issues because he wasn't playing some high-level talent in college. But this guy is like, when I watched him on tape, he literally looks like a missile coming at you. I mean, he had some big hits, especially on some quarterbacks as well. He has just really good ball skills. I like this guy a lot. I have no idea how his game will transfer to the NFL. It's a lot like watching Kyle Duggar's tape, who also played at some small school, I think Lenore Rye or something like that. So it's weird watching these really talented players play against guys that are a lot worse than them. It's hard to evaluate players like that, but this guy stuck out for a reason. And there is some speculation he could play linebacker, but I do think he'd be a very good physical, strong safety. That's where I would want him at least. And he's definitely turned heads at the combine and stuff, so I do think he could be a round 2 pick, and going to the Bears would be a nice fit in my opinion. They need that position, and Jeremy Chinn's a big hitter, a guy that, might have a learning curve a bit at first, but I think by the end of the year, in his rookie year, he'll be possibly a really good NFL safety, so I think this would be a nice pick for the Bears. At number 44, I have the Colts going Jonathan Taylor, the running back from Wisconsin. So the Colts currently have Marlon Mack on a contract year, so I'm pretty sure the Colts won't make another investment in him. He's like an average running back, I guess a little above average, but I don't see the Colts as being a team that would pay a running back. They seem a bit too analytically driven for that. So I think Taylor basically rushed for over 2,000 yards in each of his 3 seasons at Wisconsin, which is incredible. I mean, I know Melvin Gordon had that one season with 2,500 yards, and speaking of Melvin Gordon, this is just like the Mike Williams connection. It'd be funny if Phillip Rivers once again played with a Wisconsin running back, so it's just like Melvin Gordon. So I do think Jonathan Taylor would be a good fit here. He's an every down back body type, and he might split carries with Marlon Mack at first. I think Naheem Hines would definitely work on third downs in this offense. So maybe running back is not a quote unquote need right now, but when a guy like Jonathan Taylor falls to at 44, I feel like you can't really pass on that. He's just he's a really good player. Obviously, I'm not the biggest guy on taking running backs, but he even showed last year as a receiver he's much better than people expected because his receptions went up a lot. I think he had like 8 receptions the previous 2 years, and then that jumped up to 26. So he definitely showed he's an all-around great player last year. Had an awesome career at Wisconsin. A lot of wear and tear on those tires, but if he can keep it going for his rookie contract, that's a great investment in round 2 for the Colts. I forgot to mention this about Jonathan Taylor, but playing behind that Colts offensive line would be very good for him as well. Now on to pick 45 for the Buccaneers. This is my crush right here, Clyde Edwards-Hilaire, the running back from LSU. I absolutely love this guy for some reason. I mean, I feel like he's just very slept on. I think he has this great low center of gravity and has the perfect mesh of power and shiftiness to his game, and I do think whoever gets him in round 2 or round 3 is going to land a very good player. Of course, you need to be in a good system as a running back, but going here to Tampa, it's not the best fit in the world, I'll admit that, but he's a good receiving back, which Tampa definitely needs. I mean, they have this guy, Dare Agumbawale, who, I guess is alright at best, but a guy like Clyde Edwards-Hilaire can definitely be an upgrade there, and the only competition really is now Ronald Jones, because Peyton Barber, I think, went somewhere else. I think he went to Washington or something like that, so now the only competition is Ronald Jones, who I think is an average back at best. So I think if Clyde Edwards-Hilaire went here and played as a starter, he put up some really good numbers. I know the offensive line for the Buccaneers, as I mentioned before, isn't the best, but this is a scenario where we added Mekhi Becton, so hopefully, this guy, I think Mekhi Becton has his flaws in pass protection, but as a run blocker, Mekhi Becton is tremendous, so this would definitely help a guy like Edwards-Hilaire, and playing with a smart quarterback like Tom Brady, who likes to dump the ball off, and, definitely Clyde Edwards-Hilaire showed last year he's a very good receiving back, so that can definitely, boost his stats as well, so this would be a nice fit for him. He could use a better offensive line, obviously, but based on the quarterback he's playing with and the weapons they have outside, and the addition to Mekhi Becton, this would be a nice fit for Edwards-Hilaire. At number 46, I have the Broncos taking Kayvon Wallace. Their former pick at 15 was Henry Ruggs, so once again we add another very athletic player here. Wallace was a safety at Clemson mostly, can play cornerback, maybe slot cornerback at the next level, so the Broncos did have Chris Harris Jr. leave for the Chargers, but they do have Bryce Callahan, who missed a lot of 2019 with a broken foot. Callahan was a good slot corner for the Bears when he was healthy, but unfortunately was not healthy last year. But assuming he comes back and plays next year, he'll be the starting slot corner. So I'm not sure exactly where Wallace fits in right now, but they could cut Callahan after next year for basically no cap hit, so it wouldn't be the worst move in the world. I think Kayvon Wallace would be a move for the future here. So there's other ways the Broncos can go about this pick, but I like Kayvon Wallace a lot. He's very good in man coverage, very, very underrated tackler when I watched him play. He's a very good tackler for a guy his size. He's like 5'11", just over 200 pounds. Not sure if he'd survive on the outside as a corner, but definitely could be a good slot corner. Right now, the Broncos do have good safeties, so if someone were to go down, he could definitely get some snaps. He might not have a lot of snaps as a rookie, but this seems like a good future investment for the Broncos. At pick number 47, we have the Falcons taking Curtis Weaver, the edge defender from Boise State. So Atlanta did sign Dante Fowler Jr. They have Takaris McKinley on the final year of his rookie deal, so that could be a place opening for an edge rusher after this year. But if the Falcons want to compete this year, they should have another guy that can get to the quarterback. They don't have much pass rushing depth, so this would be a good move for them, in my opinion. So he doesn't have much athleticism, Curtis Weaver, but his numbers definitely speak for themselves. I know it's not the best competition for Boise State, but still looking at his sack numbers and stuff, he does put up some really good stats, so I can't really argue that. But, if I was a GM, I'd probably take a shot on a guy with more athleticism. But, for a guy who basically is good at getting to the quarterback, I think it'd be a pretty nice pick for the Falcons to make here at number 47. At number 48, I have the Jets taking Brandon Ayuk, so this would be a good pick for the Jets. I mean, the Jets are really capitalizing on some good value in this mock draft, and I'm a Giants fan, so I'm not rooting for the Jets to do well here, but Ayuk is a guy who definitely fell in this mock draft based on some of the other wide receivers that were taken and on the other position groups that were taken. I focused a lot on taking cornerbacks here because I think this cornerback class is pretty stacked in my opinion. So it would be Andrew Thomas at 11. Now they have Brandon Ayuk at number 48. Ayuk is one of those explosive players that can basically score or take the ball to the house on any play. So he's very good as a kick and punt returner as well. And Ayuk's former teammate N'Keal Harry was taken in the first round last year, but some draft experts believe Ayuk might be the better player. So this would be a really good value. I think Ayuk's a guy who very solid hands, can make big plays, and his route running is all right. So, I'm fine with him. I think at 48, this is a tremendous value. And there's other guys like Laviska Shenault. I don't really trust him in his, health history. He's not really very durable from what I've seen. So I think Ayuk right here for the Jets would be a really good pick. At number 49, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers making their first pick of the draft. Their own first round pick went to Miami from the Minkah Fitzpatrick trade, which definitely seems worth it looking back on it. So they have Jaylen Rhaegar, the wide receiver from TCU, going here. So Rhaegar is one of those guys who definitely you can get at a discount because his quarterback play in college was not anything great to be nice about it. So he possesses some really good speed and good hands and can work well with a healthy Ben Roethlisberger, hopefully. So the Steelers, some people have them going quarterback here, but in my opinion, I think the Steelers are very close to competing for a Super Bowl. I could be crazy, but their defense is that good, and a healthy Roethlisberger is still a very good quarterback. So if they get everybody healthy next year, I know it's a lot to ask for, the Steelers could be a very good team. And I like Deontay Johnson a lot, and I do think Rhaegar would probably be an upgrade from James Washington, so he could be a starter in 3 wide receiver sets. But I think a guy like Jaylen Rhaegar with that much talent, it's hard to pass up on at 49. Juju Smith-Schuster, I could be given the quarterback play, had a down year last year. A lot of the Steelers receivers had a down year. Deontay Johnson definitely had his moments. James Washington catches a deep ball here and there. But a guy like Jaylen Rhaegar can definitely fill in and be a good slot receiver for this team potentially. He's on the smaller side, so it could be a good fit. We'll see what actually happens, but I do think Rhaegar or any type of wide receiver that's good at getting open would be a nice fit for the Steelers. At pick number 50, I have the Bears addressing quarterback. So yes, Jordan Love from Utah State is the pick for me here. I did have him taking Jeremy Chin, number 43 overall, just before this. So right now the Bears have Nick Foles, who they traded for in the offseason, and Mitch Trubisky, of course, at quarterback, but they don't really have their quarterback of the future. Nick Foles is probably like 32, 33 years old at this point. So I'm not like the biggest Jordan Love fan personally, but he has a bunch of talents that you can't teach. That was my argument last year for wanting to take Drew Lock over Dwayne Haskins. Drew Lock had so much arm talent that you couldn't teach, and Dwayne Haskins didn't have that, unfortunately. So I could be wrong about Haskins and Lock, but that was my main, argument for that last year. So a guy like Jordan Love, he possesses some crazy arm talent, can make things happen on broken plays, and he does play like Patrick Mahomes. I'm not saying he's Mahomes at all, but a guy like Matt Nagy, who came from Kansas City, probably jealous that Andy Reid has a guy like Patrick Mahomes, so maybe he tries to find his own version of Patrick Mahomes and tries to make it work with Jordan Love. I don't expect it to happen at all. I really don't think Jordan Love's going to be anything great in the NFL, but when a guy has that much talent and that many tools in his toolbox, you take a shot at it at 50 overall. I don't see why not. It's not like the Bears have this great quarterback right now. Mitch Trubisky had a very down year. He's entering probably the final year, maybe 2 years away from the final year of his rookie deal, probably entering that 5th-year option next year or 2 years down the line. So Nick Foles is another guy who right now is on a pretty big contract. I'm not sure if it's easy to get out of, but I just don't think the Bears have their guy for the future. So if you have Jordan Love sitting here at number 50, I just don't see why you don't take the shot. At number 51, I have the Cowboys taking KJ Hamler, the wide receiver from Penn State. So at 17, I had them going K'Lavon Chaisson. Here's another player with some great upside, and the Cowboys right now have their outside weapons with Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup, but they don't really have a slot receiver, especially since Cole Beasley left for Buffalo. So some guys are just electric with the ball in their hands, and KJ Hamler seems to be one of those guys. I think he could be a little better at making guys miss in space, but he's not bad at it at all. So he has some moments when you're watching him that you think it's like Tyreek Hill kind of, not really quite to that level, but maybe a poor man's Tyreek Hill, which is definitely still a very good player. So if you can put KJ Hamler in the slot and just find ways to get him open and get him in space, it could end up being a great pick for the Cowboys. Now on the downside, the Cowboys did have Tavon Austin and didn't really use him too much, except for that one game against the Rams where they just had a good revenge game. But outside of that, they didn't really use Tavon Austin the right way, so maybe it might be the same fate for KJ Hamler. The downsides for a guy like him is, he's a bit small and has that small frame and could struggle against press coverage, but, against zone defenses and stuff like that, he's very good at finding the open spots and just very good with the ball in his hand. So this could be a very good round 2 investment if the Cowboys were to use him the right way. At number 52, I have the Los Angeles Rams taking Antoine Winfield Jr., the free safety from Minnesota. So this is the Rams' first pick of the draft. They did not have their own first pick, of course, based off the Jalen Ramsey trade. So after Eric Weddle's retirement, they don't really have a starting free safety right now, so why not take Antoine Winfield Jr. here? I'm a big fan of his, and some people that like to use the he's undersized argument and stuff like that. He's still bigger than Tyrann Mathieu, so I don't really know why people use that argument, but Antoine Winfield's probably the best center fielder in this draft. I know it's a baseball term, but still, he's very good at locating the ball in the air. He had like 7 interceptions last year. He's just very good at making plays, and that's exactly what you need if you're the Rams right now, a guy that can just, create turnovers in the secondary. So, I love guys like this. His dad played in the NFL. He grew up around the game, and I do think he'll be a very good player in the NFL. He'll be next to another young safety in Taylor Rapp, who's probably going to be the starting strong safety. So this could be a good pair of young safeties for maybe the next decade for the Rams if everything works out correctly. Of course, you have Jalen Ramsey out there as well. So the secondary, if Winfield hits, it could be a pretty good secondary for the Rams, but it all depends if he falls this far. In this mock he is, and I do think Winfield will be a nice fit here at 52. At pick 53, I have the Eagles taking Kyle Duggar, the safety/linebacker from Lenoir-Rhyne. So I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. I hope I am. Lenoir-Rhyne sounds right to me. So number 21, I had the Eagles going Justin Jefferson to play slot wide receiver, and Duggar's one of those guys who definitely is hard to judge. I mentioned it before talking about Jeremy Chin because it looks like he's playing against middle schoolers out there. I know he's just a freak athlete, and if you look at Kyle Duggar's combine numbers, it's just like I don't know. It's just crazy. Like his vertical was like over 40 inches, and just his 40 time was like in the 4.4s. So yeah, this guy is a terrific athlete, obviously, and I don't know if he's a linebacker or a safety, but I think it makes sense for the Eagles because they have needs at both positions. So if you find out he's a good safety, you put him a safety. If you find out he's a good linebacker, you put him a linebacker. So I think it makes sense for both things. And the one negative is that he's probably one of the oldest prospects in this draft. He's like already 24 years old, I believe. He'll be 24 by the start of next year, I believe. So that's the one downside, and it's also hard to judge him against the talent he was playing against, but at the Senior Bowl and even the Combine, he definitely turned some heads in a good way. So I think Kyle Duggar could be a good NFL player. I am not sold, but he definitely is a freak athlete. So if the Eagles can make it work, it could be a nice second-round investment for sure. At number 54, I have the Bills taking Terrell Burgess. He's a safety, I would say, / slot cornerback from Utah. So the Bills are definitely close to having a complete roster, but I do think they could use some help at slot corner. That's the one weakness I would say on their defense right now. So Burgess is definitely an above-average instincts type player, and for a college player, has the ability to play man coverage really well, and has really good football IQ. I think he's a really good tackler for his size, and he's a very interesting prospect. I mean, not a lot of people talk about him, but I think slot corner is now one of the most valuable positions in the NFL, and if you can find a good player there, it just helps your defense so much. So if the Bills can find their guy, it might be a bit of a reach, but if they can find their guy at slot corner, Terrell Burgess might be that guy. So if the Bills right now have a terrific defense. Their secondary is really good. They have a pretty good defensive line, especially the inside of their defensive line. I love Ed Oliver, by the way. They have some good linebackers as well. So if you add Terrell Burgess and he plays at a high level, that can make that scary Bills defense even scarier. At number 55, I have the Ravens going Josh Uche, the outside linebacker from Michigan. So at 28, I had them taking Zach Bond, another guy who plays a similar position. But I do think the Ravens, they do need linebacker help right now. And I think the Ravens are such a complete team that you might as well take 2 chances on a position of need here. And they have a pick and a few more picks anyway, so it's not like it's that big of a deal. So Uche is very similar to Zach Bond in terms of positions, but I do think Uche has more upside. I do think he's a better pass rusher, just more athletic athletic and does have a higher ceiling in my mind. I do think the versatility on both of these guys is very interesting. You can do a lot with both of these players. So if they want to get past a team like the Chiefs, they might need some crazy athletic linebackers, and adding Uche and a guy like Zach Bond might be a difference-making move right there. So he does have some real upside since, playing in 2018, 2019. He's put up some really good numbers for Michigan, and he's been one of the more under-the-radar type guys. But when you watch him play, I'm very impressed. I love the athleticism, and I think it could translate to the NFL very well, and this is another position of need for the Ravens. At number 56, we have the Dolphins once again. So I have them taking Ashton Davis here, the safety from California. So at 5, we have them taking Justin Herbert. 18 was Derek Brown. 26 was Josh Jones. And 39 was DeAndre Swift. This would be a very nice draft for the Dolphins. They have a chance to turn their team around right here with 5 picks in the top 56. That's pretty crazy. So Ashton Davis is a player that you either love or you hate, it seems like. I feel like he could have a decent NFL career, but I'm not too sold on him. I do have some concerns about his size and shedding blocks, and the Dolphins last year, they tried Eric Rowe at free safety. He did have some moments of success, so they might stick with him next year, but if you have a guy like Ashton Davis, maybe you try him. Not really sure where he'll go, but Davis used to run track at Cal until walking onto the football team, and he definitely has all the speed you'd want as a safety. Does have good playmaking abilities that can translate. A decent tackler, but once again, I just don't think he has that freakish athleticism. Like if you compare his athleticism to like a Grant Delpit type and the body type of Grant Delpit, it's a different player. I mean, it's just not even comparable. So I think Ashton Davis might be one of those like low-key, really good starters in the NFL for a while, but I just don't ever see him being a star. But if he's a solid player, it's definitely worth the pick here at 56. At number 57, I have the Rams addressing offensive tackle, taking Isaiah Wilson from Georgia. At 52, they had Antoine Winfield Jr., of course, for free safety. So last year, the Rams right tackle, Rob Havenstein, definitely struggled mightily. I don't know what it was, because in 2018, the guy played at a very elite level, but then in 2019, he was just awful. So I really have no idea where that came from. I don't know if he was playing injured, but who knows what it is. So Isaiah Wilson's size definitely gets overlooked in this class because of Mekhi Becton, but Wilson himself is 6'7", 350, which is like ridiculously big. So he's definitely light on his feet for his size, which I definitely found really good, and he has a good anchor for bull rushes, and he does not use his hands too well, which seems to be an issue with these Georgia tackles. I noticed that with Andrew Thomas as well. So I mean, there are concerns about him guarding speed rushers as well, so that's another thing, but the feet aren't too bad. It's just the hand placement. If he fixes his hands, I do think Isaiah Wilson could be a starting tackle in this league. I don't know what they're going to do with Havenstein. I don't know if it's just a one bad year type of thing, but I do think the Rams need to address their offensive line in general. I know their left tackle, Andrew Whitworth, is getting up there in age, so this could be a nice future investment right here. I do think he's one of the better players left on the board, so I think it's a pretty decent fit for the Rams. At pick number 58, we have the Vikings taking Michael Pittman Jr., the wide receiver from USC. So I mentioned it before for the Vikings. You don't have to take a wide receiver in the first round because you can still get a very good one in the second round. So I had them going Jaylen Johnson, then Yetur Gross-Matos in the first round to help their defense. So now for Michael Pittman, I mean, he's a very good number 2 wide receiver, I think, for the NFL. I don't know if he's a wide receiver 1. I don't really see that for him. I don't think he has that athleticism, but I could be wrong. He's 6'4", 223, just a very solid receiver. He won't blow you away with the athleticism or speed, but he could be like a Cortland Sutton type receiver. I mean, Sutton had a tremendous year last year, and if he could use that big body to his advantage, he could have a good NFL career. I could be wrong about him. So, I mean, he does have good hands. He's tough to bring down with the ball in his hands. I do think it could be a nice fit along with Adam Thielen. So I do think the Vikings could use a more, freakishly athletic type guy, and I think Laviska Shenault could be a pick here, but at the same time, I think Shenault has too many injuries to pick here in the top 2 rounds, so that's what I'm going with. But Michael Pittman's not a bad receiver at all. I think he's a very solid number 2 wide receiver. The Vikings already have their number 1 with Adam Thielen, so I think this would be a pretty nice fit for Michael Pittman. At number 59, I have the Seahawks taking Julian Okwara, the outside linebacker or defensive end from Notre Dame. Their first pick was Austin Jackson, the offensive tackle, at 36. So the Seahawks have Bruce Irvin at defensive end, and who knows what L.J. Collier is going to give them, who was their first-round pick last year. Julian Okwara is a guy who has just a great mixture of power and finesse. He never produced like too highly in college, which is a bit concerning, but you look at his frame and his athleticism, this guy definitely has it all, and it seems like Jadeveon Clowney is not going to be back with the Seahawks next year, so this is like their hopeful replacement for a guy like Clowney. Not saying Okwara is going to be Clowney in year one, but he could work up to it eventually. His brother Romeo Okwara once played for the Giants and now plays for the Lions as well, who had some pretty decent years, or seasons I should say. So I think Julian Okwara, based on an athleticism standpoint, then the sky's the limit for a guy like that, but he didn't produce too highly. It's not the best scheme fit, I don't think, but Seattle seems to make it work with these outside edge rusher type guys, so I do think it could work for a guy like Julian Okwara. We'll just have to see if it actually happens. At number 60, I have the Ravens getting Netane Muti, the guard from Fresno State. So at first we had them taking the two outside linebackers, Zach Bond and Josh Uche. So the first two picks were addressing defense. Now we have a Marshall Yonder replacement. Marshall Yonder, of course, retired recently, playing right guard. So I do think Netane Muti, if he was healthy and didn't have the injury concerns, would probably be a first-round pick. And a team like the Ravens, you're so close to winning a Super Bowl with this roster. I say, why not take the chance? I mean, he's honestly probably the strongest player in this draft. He's a great run blocker, can move people in the run game. The Ravens love to run the ball. I think based off a scheme fit and just a good fit for a team in general, I think Netane Muti and the Ravens makes a lot of sense. So he did have an Achilles injury in 2018, a Liz Frank foot injury in 2019, but when he played in 2017, he was really good. I mean, this guy has a really good highlight tape for an offensive lineman, which is crazy to say, but it's true. So really good run blocker. He's a good enough pass blocker. I think he was healthy enough to participate in his pro day if it actually were to happen. That's what his doctors were saying, at least. So right now he's healthy. So, this is a very, very high risk, but a very, very high reward type of pick. And I think the team, like, if you're the Ravens, you're this close to winning a Super Bowl, I say you take that shot. At number 61, I have the Titans addressing their defense again. Their first pick at 29 was Ross Blacklock. This time it's the cornerback from Ohio State, Damon Arnett. So anytime you play with a guy like Jeffrey Okudah, you're bound to get overlooked and overshadowed, but that's pretty much what happened with Damon Arnett. So he surprisingly returned for his senior season in 2019, but did very well for the Buckeyes last year. Arnett isn't that fast. His 40 time was like 4.57, I believe, or something around there, but at the same time, this guy is really good in man coverage, and I think his tackling ability is pretty underrated. So there have been character concerns in the past. I think he's matured since then. That's what his coaches and people around him have been saying. So I think in the right scheme, Arnett would be a very good player. He's one of my favorite sleepers in this class, if you can call a guy like this a sleeper. But I'm a big Arnett fan. I think people are overlooking him. I do think on a team like the Titans, it would be a very good fit for him. Not sure how much he would play because there are two cornerbacks ahead of him on the depth chart, basically. But if he gets on the field in his rookie year, I think he could make some noise. It's a good scheme fit, and I do think Arnett in the right situation could have a pretty good NFL career. At number 62, we have the Packers taking Marlin Davidson, the defensive lineman from Auburn. Their first pick was Denzel Mims at wide receiver. So he's 6'3", 300 pounds, and Davidson's pretty versatile. He can play defensive end or nose tackle in a 3-4 defense, which the Packers do play. Has very good hands. He's very strong. Had 7.5 sacks last season. Doesn't have great length, which is why he's not going higher in the draft, and could have some issues shedding blocks, but we'll see how that translates to the NFL. But there is some upside with a player like this. So there are moments where Davidson looks like a first-round pick on tape, and then there's times where it looks like he's doing nothing. So it's really going to be interesting how it plays out. But he does have a good defense around him if he were to go to a team like Green Bay, so that definitely could help him. They had a failed pick last year, it seems like, with Rashawn Gary, so hopefully a guy like that can pick it up, and maybe they pick up a guy like Marlon Davidson for their defensive line that can have a good rookie year, so we'll see what happens. At number 63, I have the Chiefs taking Terrell Lewis, the outside linebacker from Alabama. Their previous pick was the cornerback A.J. Terrell, so two Terrells, one last name, one first name. He was the cornerback from Clemson. So I feel like I'm one of the only Terrell Lewis fans out there. I feel like everyone that talks about the draft, they never bring up Terrell Lewis, and even when they do, it's in a pretty negative way. I do know the guy has an injury history. In 2017, had an elbow injury that required surgery. 2018 was a torn ACL, but he did have a healthy 2019 season for the most part. Has great length. He's 6'5", 262, and with that length, he has a surprising amount of power as well. When you watch him play, I mean, look, he's not like a stat patter, but when you watch him play, he's always like making a difference. He's always like showing good strength and pushing the line back and usually making plays. I liked him on tape. I mean, he's not like he's not a stats guy, but when you watch him play, I was a fan of Terrell Lewis. I think on a defensive line with Frank Clark and Chris Jones, you can definitely get the best out of Terrell Lewis. I would love to see a landing spot like the Chiefs. That's kind of why I put him here, and I do think he could fall fall to the end of the second round because, as I said, not many people are hyping up Terrell Lewis right now, but in my opinion, he could be one of the best values in this draft. And the last pick of this draft at 64 is going to be a trade. I have the Saints trading up to take Jalen Hurts, the quarterback out of Oklahoma. This is the Seahawks pick. We know they love to trade back. I would have the Seahawks getting pick number 88 in round 3, pick number 130 in round 4, and pick number 203 in round 6. And the Saints, of course, received pick number 64. So the Saints took Kenneth Murray, inside linebacker, at 24. So Drew Brees, as I said before, very close to retiring this offseason, decided to come back and give it one more chance. I don't really look at Taysom Hill as a legitimate franchise quarterback option. I don't see him starting 16 games as a quarterback. So I think Jalen Hurts will be a really good fit for this offense. He has really good touch, really good accuracy. I feel like that would work well in a Sean Payton type offense because those are things Drew Brees is good at. But of course, Jalen Hurts definitely offers a lot with his legs as well. And basically he uses Taysom Hill's legs and uses Drew Brees' accuracy, but you can put that into one with Jalen Hurts, and that could be a very good player. So I think people, you either like Jalen Hurts or you don't. I feel like he could have a pretty good NFL career if he's given the opportunity, but it all depends about opportunity, so we'll see. So I think Hurts could go earlier, but I think it just depends. I really don't know how the draft's going to look at him. I had the Bears taking Jordan Love over Jalen Hurts. You could argue either way on that one. You could argue that Jake Fromm should have went by now, but I don't really see him as a top 2-round pick. So I have Jalen Hurts going 64, and that'll do it for this draft. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. I think I got this done in just under an hour. So, if I keep talking, we can go over an hour, but hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know your favorite picks. I actually was supposed to go over some of the guys that fell in this draft. I was supposed to go over that, actually. So before we end this real quick, let me do that. So here are some of the key names still left. We have Lucas Niang, the offensive tackle from TCU, another really big guy. Prince Tega Wanogho from Auburn. He's a guy who's pretty raw but has a bunch of talent. Tyler Biadasz. I'm a big Tyler Biadasz fan. I'm surprised I had him falling, but there's not really much of a need for centers after a few teams. I could have put him on the 49ers in the second round, but it is what it is. Laviska Shenault. I brought him up a couple times. I am not a big fan of his because of the injury history. I don't really see him as being a great route runner either. Bryce Hall from Virginia. I think he's a better zone player. We'll see. He might fall to not day 3, but probably the 3rd round. So that's a possibility. Jake Fromm, a guy who I said should probably go in the 3rd or 4th round. That'll be interesting. Cam Akers from Florida State. The guy was on a terrible team, but Cam Akers himself looked pretty good. Cole Kmet. I didn't have any tight ends actually in the top 2 rounds, but Cole Kmet from Notre Dame is a player I like and think would thrive on the right team. Cameron Dantzler, a pretty lanky cornerback from Mississippi State, so that's another good option at cornerback. I have no idea why I put Muti here because I literally had him going to the Ravens, but that's an editing mistake on my part. Justin Matabuke from Texas A&M, a defensive lineman, another guy who does have a lot of good upside, but then some people don't like him. I don't think I really was a fan of his when I watched him, so that's why I had him falling. And of course, Chase Claypool, the wide receiver / tight end. I have no idea what to think of Claypool. Could be the next Vincent Jackson. Could be the next big receiver that fails in the NFL. I have no idea. I do think he should play tight end, but we'll see how whatever team drafts him wants to use him. So once again, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you made it all the way through, I greatly appreciate it. Let me know if you did. I'd be very happy if you did. So if you want some more post-draft content like this, if you enjoyed my opinion about these players. I watched so many of them, I figured I might as well put my opinion out there. So if you want some post-draft content like this, let me know in the comments, and I'll definitely do so. So thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.